republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Miss Deb.
Good morning.
Good morning, Deb.
Morning.
Not in the cheap seats.
You can't hide.
No, I can't, I guess.
These are the $2 seats, I think.
Okay, we do have open session on Thursday, so we will hold all our priority carols and happy-go-lucky things till Thursday. Let's dive right into the FY24 proposed budget.
Okay,
Sir.
one side comment before we get there. Deb and I have been doing this together for a long time. She recently was stolen away from me by Roberta to be the new deputy county administrator. Significant loss for me, but I'm glad that she's still here in the county, and I'm sure she will do some really good things in her new place.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And stolen is such a hard word. It's true, but hard. So, you know.
Gentler than the one I would have chosen.
Congratulations on the theft.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
So we're here to talk about the FY24 proposed budget and our plans for fiscal years 24 through 29. This presentation is not an attempt to cover everything in the budget. They're just way too much. But I want to try to talk about where are the changes, where there are interesting things happening. And I want to try and give some context to where we ended up and how we got there. And one important thing is this is the point in the process where this becomes the commissioner's budget. Up until now, we were developing. There was a recommendation from the budget office, but now this is the budget that the commissioners offer to the public to say, here's where we think we're going. What do you think? So the process is an open process. All the budget sessions are open to the public. And because it's an open process, what we're going to talk about today is not a surprise to anybody who's been following. There was a day when we didn't do it this way, and right now we would be downstairs in the hearing room, and the room would be full because people wanted to know what's going to be in the budget or not in the budget. But now anybody who's interested can follow along. All the sessions are shown live and then replayed on Comcast Channel 24. Sessions are streamed on our YouTube channel. And you can go to the website and find everything if you want. You can go to the website to our calendar and find links to videos. There are news releases and things come out through our email subscription service. And there's information available on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Sometimes we get late in the process and somebody will come up to me and say, why was this all done in secret? Why didn't I know about this? And the answer is because you weren't paying attention. There's a lot of information available. We can't go around and knock on everybody's door and share the news of the day. But if you're interested, it's there. So what are we going to cover? What were the commissioner actions that were taken as we went through the process of getting to this proposed budget? What did the state do that had implications for us? How has the budget and our plans changed from what's being proposed to where we are today? And then I want to give some highlights, both of our governmental partners that we fund and for the agencies who actually report to the commissioners. And then we'll talk some about our capital budget. So commissioner actions. And as we go through this, because we're going to talk about things in a few different ways, what did the commissioners do? How have things changed? Giving highlights. There are some items that might come up more than once. The intent is not to bore you with repetition, but just we're going to hit things in different ways. So first, commissioners are proposing to increase the recordation tax from $5 per $500 to $6.25 per $500. That will increase revenues by a projected $3.9 million. This is the first time there's been a rate increase in Carroll County, and I don't remember the exact year, but since the early 2000s, probably 2005 or something like that.
And just to put in also context, we are not requesting to look at transfer fees or to go to the Assembly, General Assembly. This is only because we don't have them in the county. So
Yeah, Carroll is one of, I believe, 5 counties in Maryland that does not have a transfer tax. Most counties have both a transfer tax and a recordation tax. The commissioners added $6.25 million of funding to Carroll County Public Schools. And about $100,000 to Carroll Community College. And we will be talking about both these in greater detail when I get to the highlights section. Added $600,000 to the public library, and beginning in fiscal year 29, an increase of $50,000 of ongoing funding for technology purposes. Sheriff, they added $1.3 million above the salary recommendation that was already built in of a $1 million increase. State's Attorney, they added $340,000 above the planned increase, and also added 3 positions in what's called the Evidence Review Unit. This is in connection with the state mandated body worn, and we also have camera mounted cameras. The challenge here, or maybe one of the big challenges here, is the amount of video that's going to be produced and the things that we will have to do with that video, and there will be people necessary to do that. $200,000 to the courts for salary increases above what was built into the recommendation. 2 positions in our fire EMS. And a landfill equipment operator for Northern Landfill. Our nonprofit service providers, Access Carroll, gets about almost $40,000 for some technology upgrades. And what has been flat funding for a number of years will now have a 3% assumed rate of growth. Rape Crisis will be getting about $5,500. This is to hold them over until they can put into action some hope to step up their fundraising and grant seeking. And Human Services Program, almost $50,000. This is to increase salaries to the shelter staff. Health Department, commissioners agreed to fund stipends for the environmental staff. This will not be the same for every person. There are things that will have to happen to qualify for it, but it won't exceed $4,000 per person. Comptroller, this does not look exciting, but this is actually pretty big news for the people who are involved in this stuff. We're going to be getting a new financial management system. The commissioners added $350,000 ongoing. This is one of those things where we've talked about the world has changed from us buying things to us basically now leasing, in a sense. This is an ongoing cost of having this system. We've actually been talking about doing this for more than a decade. We budgeted it more than a decade ago, but there have been other things that kept getting in the way, but today we're finally here. State mandated a police accountability board. The commissioners have put that into place and added funding to give those members a per diem for their meeting time. Position in land and resource management, and also $60,000 in connection with some GIS changes that we want to make.
Ted, real quick, back to revenue, are you going to share about the utilities and also
Yes.
landfill? Okay, that's okay.
And soil conservation, commissioners added about $45,000 of funding beyond what was in the recommendation for salary increases. Board of Elections, $7,300 to increase the stipend for local election board members. And we're also funding, and this is still very early. We don't know that these are the numbers. We have negotiations to go through and planning to go through, but commissioners included $5.5 million for building out space and about $500,000 for leasing space. The Board of Elections is in county-owned property now, but they've outgrown the space. That's largely because of decisions that are being made at the state. But we have to provide the space. So we are looking to get them into bigger, more appropriate space. It'll be a mix of office and warehouse. And this really is the start of that process. Some changes in the capital fund, reduction to our plans to remediate a chemical referred to as PFAS. We don't know yet what this is all going to look like. Reduction to changes we need to make to Piney Run Dam. Commissioners reduced in an ongoing way how much money is going to agricultural land preservation by $1 million. Then added in fiscal year 24 one-time funding of $1.5 million to land preservation. Budgeted $18 million for a parking garage to serve the government campus. This is another one that's still in early stages. We don't know yet exactly what the scope is, which means we don't know what the price is yet either, but this is a starting point for us. There was a 5.55% salary increase for commissioner employees, the courts, and the state's attorney. The commissioners reduced that to 4.55. We made use of fiscal year 22 surplus or fund balance in the 24 budget. As we do every year, we assumed 1% from previous year is available for ongoing operations. Then there was about $34 million used in one-time ways for a list of projects. We will go through more detail of that in a little bit. The FY23 projected surplus is about $24 million, and that remains, well, it doesn't exist yet because the year's not over, but that was not touched. State budget. And we talk about the state budget because they make decisions that impact us here and often lead to decisions that you're forced to make. Fortunately, this year was fairly quiet as state legislation goes in terms of impacting county operations. And the state can make decisions in two ways that hurt us. One is they take away something that we've been getting from them. The other is they tell us we need to do something that we weren't doing before. There's not as much left to take away as there once was. So that's not as big a worry as it was in other times. But we do worry about what are they going to tell us that we have to do. Not too much of that this year. So the state is also a funder of some agencies that we have funding obligations for and interest in. Carroll County Public Schools, they're going to get $179 million, an increase of about $21 million. This is good news in the sense that it's a bigger increase than we've seen from the state in a long time. It's also a challenge and a difficulty tied to blueprint legislation that specifies what they have to do with most of this money, which is causing difficulties in figuring out how the school system's actually going to handle their budget and operations. People who are following the school system will be hearing a lot more about this in the coming months. Carroll Community College, $14.4 million, an increase of 1.5. The last 2 years of state funding have been the best that the college has seen in a very long time. This is welcome news. Carroll County Public Library, $1.3 million, a small increase, $36,000. Historically, the library has used this funding for materials. They buy books and CDs and et cetera. Health Department, 4.6, an increase of $600,000. State funding that's coming to the commissioners. Highway user revenue, state shared transfer tax, or not transfer tax, state shared revenue, $3.2 million. This is an increase of $500,000. Welcome news. It's hard to say what this means for the future. The next couple years are specified in legislation, although that's subject to change any year, and we've seen things change. But then it will drop back down again after that unless something else happens. So we're careful in what we do with this. This is all tied to capital uses. We try and put ourselves in a position where we can use this without being reliant on it. And even though there are higher amounts built into 25 and 26, we've not yet built those into the plan. We're waiting to see that it actually shows up before we decide to tie it to a project. Police aid, $900,000, that hasn't changed. Program open space, a state shared transfer tax, $1.8 million, an increase of $1 million, $100,000.
Million would be nice.
Yes. And Deb almost always corrects me about too many or not enough zeros at some point, but I caught myself on that one before she got to me. So what changed from where we are today? We have a new plan, all new revenues, all new expenditures. You can see where we stand today. Fiscal year 24, as proposed, of course, is balanced, as it has to be. But you see, the rest of the plan, with the exception of a small positive balance in 26, is in the negative. We are overcommitted. We've taken on commitments to services that we don't know how we're going to pay for in the future. Now, every year, of course, we have to balance our budget because, so we will always solve this. But as we look out for the long term, we know we have things we need to work on. My goal, I hope to work with the commissioners to keep moving us toward a better picture. This isn't going to happen overnight, but we should be working to get back to a position where we can say, here's our plans, and we believe they work. Yeah, and for people listening who might look at this and say, well, you're just spending too much, do less. My message to you is to just say spend less is too easy a thing to say. What we have to talk about is what does that mean for services? If you say spend less, you need to attach that to what are we going to do less of? And one of the big challenges for us, Carroll County is not service rich. Most of what we do is pretty basic stuff. To say do less is a challenging idea. So changes from the op plan. And the day we adopt the next budget, the next plan, things will begin to change. Even as we went through your sessions, we came to you almost every time saying, here's something that changed. That's just the nature of what we do. It doesn't stand still. We have to learn what's happening and react as we can. Things that decreased for the op plan. So these are things that put you in a better position. OPEB, other post-employment benefits. This is retiree health care. Changes in our actuarial position have led to our actuary telling us we can reduce how much we're funding. We've been going at this for a couple years now. We still have the multi-year plan to get there. We're reluctant to tell you we should just make this change all at once. My fear is that things will change again, and then we'll find that we've put ourselves into a more difficult position. But we did make major changes, major reductions in 24 and 25, less so in 26 through 29. Debt service. We talked about the use of FY22 fund balance. A lot of that went to replace debt, replace the need for bonds. We don't sell the bonds. We don't take on the debt service. That gives you an ongoing improvement to your bottom line. And transfer to the Workers' Comp Internal Service Fund. There's a separate pot of money where we pay our workers' compensation costs. Money gets moved from your operating budget into that fund. We reduced how much is going into there. This is based on our experience, what's really happening, and the current position of the balance that's there. And looking ahead, we do have a strong balance there, but we're not suggesting doing anything with that because we are starting our journey into our career EMS force. Workers' compensation claims will undoubtedly come along with this. We don't know what that's going to look like, but better to be in a strong position that we can back off of than to take ourselves to where we think we need to be right in this moment and have to figure this out later. Increases from the op plan. So these are things that made it more difficult for you. Salaries has been a big thing. The last board during fiscal year 23 approved some major compensation changes to address the difficulties. Difficulties is not strong enough. We were facing severe challenges in filling a lot of our positions. They approved some compensation changes to try and put us in a better position to attract the people that we need to provide the services that the county is responsible for. This ended up hitting lots of places. County employees, you approve funding. Well, we don't specifically fund salaries for the school system and the library and the community college. The commissioners added funding that we understand the intent is to use that for salaries. Made changes to the sheriff and the state's attorney, soil conservation. One piece of legislation at the state that did affect us, they accelerated the minimum wage law. We had to make changes to react to that. Not quite salaries, but compensation-related stipends for election board and judges, the police accountability board, and health department environmental health staff. None of those were in the current plan. I mentioned earlier, commissioners added by about $6.25 million to the school system. As we continue to figure out exactly what the EMS transition looks like, there was funding added beyond what was built into the plan. Facilities, this is reacting basically to cost changes. What we are paying for utilities, what we're paying for supplies, work we have to contract out, we're seeing increases in a lot of places beyond what we built into the plan. Now, in fiscal year 23, it's not that we were ignoring the possibility of increases. We built in places where we thought we knew enough. And we also built into the reserve for contingencies an extra, was it $5 million? $5 million in case we needed to deal with things that had not been built into specific budgets. Similar story in fleet. Vehicle prices have gone up, and in many cases we're finding we're on very long waiting lists to get vehicles. Parts have increased. In roads, the vendor we used for doing tree trimming along our roads got purchased by somebody else. We had to rebid the next contract, and it came in a good bit higher than what we had been paying. Information technology. Mentioned body-worn cameras earlier. We're still feeling our way to what this is all going to mean. And just the idea of subscriptions, what I talked about, instead of buying things, we're leasing things. This is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our picture. Transfer to the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. While it's an enterprise fund, we know it can't support itself under current arrangements, at least. We've run into fuel surcharges with our transfer contracts, and recycling is becoming a growing cost. Yeah, this bounces around some, but the basic story is what used to be a revenue to us is now a cost. And sometimes when this comes up, people will say, well, stop recycling. We have a state mandated requirement for recycling that we need to do. And we are not doing a great deal beyond what we're mandated to. Our revenue sharing program with our municipalities, the formula is partially based on inflation. Inflation was up this year in a way we haven't seen for well more than a decade. That led to funding increase to the towns. Salary changes mean changes to pension obligations. We had to deal with that. Transfer to capital. This is cash you move from your operating fund to your capital fund. Put $14.5 million for the sheriff's headquarters and $300,000 annually for self-contained breathing apparatus. This is something has been evolving for a number of years. Some time ago, Visa came to the commissioners asking for matches for some grants they were looking at that eventually ended up turning into more and more funding. This is now built into our process. This is something that we are paying for. Said earlier we would give a little bit more detail on the use of the surplus from fiscal year 22. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I'll point out parking garage, $18 million. Lease space for elections, $5.5 million. $2.5 million for expansion of courtroom 6. Now, these are all one-time uses. Now, and sometimes one-time uses do lead to some ongoing costs, and we have to plan for those. But the big idea here is we were avoiding the cost of debt. More increases from the existing op plan. EMS, we added a third chase vehicle. We need 4 positions to staff that. A quartermaster position, I mentioned a little bit earlier, billing technician and data analyst. State's attorney, we talked about the 3 positions for the evidence review unit. Those weren't planned. Position in land resource management. You added a project manager for building construction. And we've got some big projects and other smaller projects. We've gotten to a point where they just don't have the ability to staff all of the projects that are in their hands. And the landfill equipment operating we already mentioned. Now some highlights. Again, some of these things will come up in some way, but we're tying what happened in specific parts of your budget. First, all funds. This is everything. You know, people often talk about the operating budget or general fund. Capital fund gets some attention, but we have about a dozen different funds. We have all the enterprise funds, the pension fund, grant fund. You add all those up, in fiscal year 24, it's about $770 million. The operating budget or general fund, $546.7 million, up from fiscal year 23 by about $45 million. A big part of that change is that one-time funding we're talking about, because remember, that gets transferred from your operating budget. So it shows up as a cost, but then that's going to be spent in the capital fund. Our governmental partners, Carroll County Public Schools, county funding of $225.9 million. I don't remember what the state number was now. What, 175? 179. An important point to make. We are the bigger funder of Carroll County Public Schools, and we went through a period of time where the relationship was getting closer and closer. We were moving toward a 50-50. We're no longer there. The gap is widening again. That's an increase of 5.1%, but there was $2 million of one-time funding in fiscal year 23. So if you really look at what's happening to the base, it's about a 6% increase in funding.
Shoot.
Probably been a while since we've had as much as a 6% increase to the school system. This is another idea that comes up a lot. What kind of annual increases are necessary for the school system? And I think somebody can construct a reasonable argument that something like 6% a year might be a reasonable argument. Problem is, our whole budget is growing 3%, maybe even a little less than 3%. The school budget is almost half of our budget. When we're growing less than 3%, it's hard for half of our budget to grow at 6%. So even if the commissioner said, we want to grow the school system at 6% a year, we would be challenged to figure out how to go about doing that. Debt service for school purposes goes up about $13 million. This is a pretty big increase, $2 million. This is tied to the two big projects that are going on now, or primarily the Career and Tech expansion and renovation and the new East Middle School. The state requires this to be part of their budget, but in a practical way, it is not part of the school's budget. It's our debt. We pay the debt service, but we have to report it this way. Community college, $12 million of county funding, an increase of $500,000. Also associated with the school system, the adult basic education, flat at $300,000, and the Carroll Entrepreneurship Program, $100,000, a small increase. Library, $11.3 million, an increase of $900,000. This is largely tied to the additional funding I mentioned a little bit earlier for them to be able to give salary increases. Cable Regulatory Commission, $190,000. This is a 5% increase that's built into the agreement that exists between the county, the Cable Regulatory Commission, and the 8 municipalities. Community Media Center, this is funded by part of the franchise fee on our Comcast agreement. This is dictated by the amount of revenue that actually comes in. Courts, $300,000, 12% increase. The bulk of this was the additional money for salary increases. Sheriff, $27.5 million, an increase of more than $2 million. Just want to stop here for a second to say the last board and this board over the last 3 years have made what I would call an extraordinary commitment to sheriff salaries. There was something, I believe, about $1.5 million built into recommendations in those years. That would have happened without any additional actions. But in each year, the commissioners have taken on additional funding decisions that added up to, I believe, an extra $5.5 or $6 million beyond what was planned. State's attorney, $4.5 million, $700,000 increase. That was driven by the additional funding for salary increases and those 3 positions that we talked about. Animal control, $1 million, small decrease, but their ongoing funding is still going up 3%. There was one-time money in fiscal year 23 for a vehicle and also for the startup costs for a new position that was approved last year, or in fiscal year 23 for funding. LoSAP, Length of Service Award Program. This is incentive for our volunteers. $700,000 flat from fiscal year 23. This is another separate fund. We believe we're in a strong position now, and it wasn't necessary to increase funding. We've significantly increased funding over the last handful of years. We'll be getting another actuarial study this year, I believe. We'll see where we are and what that means for next year. Emergency medical services. This is the existing program run by Visa, 2.7, a decrease of $2.7 million. This is tied to the transition that we're going through from EMS being provided by our volunteer companies to EMS being provided by a county career staff. This is staffing of 6 of the companies. 7 more are still to follow. Visa Volunteer Emergency Services Association, $5 million, a decrease of $1.8 million. Of the things they're paying for, their budget is still going up 3% plus an additional $64,000. The decrease is the same story. There are costs that have been in their budget that we are taking on ourselves now. Fire Services Administration, this is your department, 7.2, increase of $3.3 million. Much of that is the flip side of the things that we just talked about, but it's also positions that we've been adding. Net new funding for fire EMS. This is how much we're adding beyond what was already in the mix somewhere. And of course, this is one of our biggest challenges. We've taken on a large new expenditure, a large new obligation. When we started this, we did not identify where is the money coming from to pay for this. Now, the commissioners did take the step of changing recordation this year, not specifically for this, but there's no getting around that these costs are driving our position. So, for these changes, we're talking about salary and fringe benefits, the costs of getting these positions in place, ongoing operating costs, and we're also now needing to plan for replacing it, not just plan. We already have funding in place for replacing, I think, 4 ambulances, but now there will be a continued need. Citizen services, or nonprofit service providers, in total, about $4.5 million, an increase of about $100,000. Mentioned some one-time funding earlier for Access Carol and Rape Crisis, support for HSP and the health department. Board of Elections, $2.3 million, an increase of $100,000. That's actually a little bit less than it really would appear because there were 2 elections we had to fund in 23 and only 1 election in fiscal year 24. Conservation and Natural Resources, $1 million, an increase of $83,000. Half of that was the additional salary funding you gave to soil conservation. Now looking to the people who actually report to you. I just want to point out as we go through here 2 things. One, you'll see that quite a few of your departments actually have decreases in funding, and others have very modest increases in funding. And the other is how we're presenting this. We are showing you the FY24 budget against what we call the adjusted FY23. And the adjustment was to build in those salary changes you made in fiscal year 23. If we went from budget to budget, you would see all those increases happening, and it wouldn't really show you what's happening kind of to the basic budget. The other thing is, these are without benefits. Our health benefits, they're budgeted in HR and eventually will be spread across all the agencies. But it's another place where you see those changes and it really masks what's actually happening in terms of the services those agencies can provide. So public safety, 6.7, up $200,000. Public works, 42 million, up about $4 million. Citizen services, 1.9, a decrease of 300,000. That decrease is because we have grant funding for the facility down in South Carroll where we do some drug alcohol rehab. That will not continue forever. So we have built into the plan that going back to our funding. But for 24, it helped. I think it's partially in 25.
Yeah, partial.
Rec and Parks, 3.3 million, an increase of 400,000. Culture, this is Union Mills and Historical Society, and that's it.
That's it.
$100,000 flat funding. Comprehensive planning, $1.1 million, a decrease of 100,000. There was some one-time money for the next master plan in 23. There is one-time money in 24 for the master plan, but it's less than it was in 23. So it led to a decrease. Comptroller, 3.7, an increase of $200,000. And
That's not in here.
that's not it, okay.
It's in IT.
Okay. Economic development, 2.9, a small decrease. Land and resource management, 2.9, a small increase. Management and budget, 3.6, a decrease of 44,000. That's tied to that workers' compensation change I talked about. So this budget is going up a little bit, but it's being offset by that transfer to the workers' comp. Oh yeah, I mentioned economic development. The wine festival is going from 2 days to 1 day, which reduced some expenditures. Technology services increase of $1.3 million. $350,000 of that is that financial system we were talking about, seeing increases in lots of other subscription costs, and also a change in how we're going to store digitally saved information. Administrative hearings, small increase. Audio video, small increase. Human resources, 18.8 million, a decrease of 11.7. This goes back to the OPEB change that I was talking about. So this is not a fundamental change in their budget, what they can do. It's mostly about the change in how we're funding OPEB. We were able to decrease what we fund budget for medical claims, again based on experience. Reduce the internal service fund, much like workers' comp. Our medical claims get paid out of a separate pot of money. We were able to reduce how much is going there because of our claims experience, and has been a good story in recent years. We were able to negotiate an increase in prescription rebates, which is a savings to the county. Notting Carroll, small increase. County Commissioner's budget out of control. Going up $100,000. This is primarily about adding the new position, right? Or is that already in?
No, it's about the technology position. It
Oh,
was
okay,
in
yes,
IT,
yep, yep.
and now we moved it to Commissioner's office.
Yes, the position that was created last year to shepherd our technology projects. We had originally budgeted in IT. It's moving to the commissioner's budget to work more directly with Roberta. So it's an increase here, but it was a decrease in IT. County attorney, small increase. Half of that is that stipend for the Police Accountability Board. Now take a look at capital. here at a high level is how it changed from 23 to 24. The capital budget is kind of inherently lumpy as we move from one year to another. It just depends on what projects we happen to have in a year. A year where Career and Tech and East Middle School got budgeted, you'll see a big increase. They drop out of the budget, and you're going to see a decrease or a smaller increase. State funding going down, that's tied to those two school projects. So talking about schools, some of the big stuff going on, Career and Tech, East Middle School, HVAC replacements. This is a big change because last year we got in a position where we were worried that all the state funding was being sucked up by the Career and Tech and East Middle School projects. They weren't going to fund HVAC. We were not going to fund the projects on our own, so that got pulled. Things have changed now. We, in fact, got a little bit more money from the state than we had anticipated, and the two big projects are winding down, so this is all back in the plan again. We have design for kindergarten and pre-K additions. The kindergarten additions go back all the way to state-mandated full-day kindergarten years ago, and there were, I think, 4 elementary schools that we never got to doing the additions. Now, the pre-K additions is tied to Blueprint and the increased level of service we're going to need. This is to help us decide what we can do and where, but the bigger challenge is still ahead of us and is not in our plans at all. How many additions are we going to do? What's that going to cost? And we talked about this before. One of the big challenges there is Blueprint as it exists assumes a major role for the private sector in providing pre-K. That seems unlikely to play out the way legislation assumed it would. So it makes it even more difficult for us to figure out how much space do we even need to provide. We don't know, when we don't know how much of the service is going to be in our hands. Paving, technology, these are ongoing budgets. Same with relocatable classrooms. Roof replacements are still built into our plan. The last planned one is in what year, Deb?
29?
Okay, so maybe the last year of this plan. But we've been working our way through a major bubble of roof replacements, and the end is in sight. That's
What would help us, I think, or at least help me, is not necessarily for you, but somebody to define where these activities are taking place. Where the HVAC replacements by
it's in
schedule.
the capital.
So we have a list because people are asking, what's happening, in Freedom or Carrolltown in my area, or could be in other people's areas. What about the roof or the HVAC or X, paving?
Section that shows the master plan.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to look at that.
Yeah.
One, we include in the capital budget the school system's facility master plan, which lays out what they're asking for. But you can also go to what we have budgeted and planned in our CIP, and for HVAC and roofs, we show specific projects in the first year. Right?
Yes, which
Okay.
usually span over 2 years.
So you can see what the next projects are, but then we also include a list of the likely projects to come
Okay.
along. So, and the reason we don't budget all of them is because we find the priorities change
Sure.
too much. As the school evaluates their HVACs and roofs, we could have 6 years programmed, but we might find that 3 of the years have to end up changing because something has become a greater priority. But you can get a good idea of what's up. Or alternatively, if you're looking for your school and you're not budgeted in 24 and you're not on that list of likely ones, that means right now that's a fairly low priority.
Right. Okay.
And and on that point, like I said, this presentation can't cover everything, but there's a lot of information available beyond this presentation. And if people have questions, if you're at one of the community meetings that I'll be doing over the next 2 weeks, or you just want to email or call, and you want to know more than what I just said here, we'll be glad to get you the information that you need. Things not in. And the list of things that's not in is actually very long. I gave a very shorthand version here. The next priority of the school system is a modernization of William Winchester Elementary School. That is not in the plan. But then we also have to say there's a long list of other modernizations that we could be talking about, and we're not. And this goes back to one of our big challenges. How do we keep up with our schools? And one way of looking at this is we have 40 school buildings. If you assume the life of a school is 40 years, that would suggest we need to be modernizing or replacing one every year. If we assume they have a life of 80 years, that's still one every other year. We are not replacing or modernizing anywhere near that schedule. What we are doing is pieces. We're doing roofs, we're doing HVACs, we're doing windows, we're doing fire alarm systems, electrical systems. There aren't a whole lot of comprehensive modernizations happening, though. And in fact, the replacement East Middle School is the first one that we've taken on in a good while. Am I forgetting something? Would Mount Airy be the last one? Yeah. And that's probably been 10 years.
It was wrapping up when I came on board, so I'm thinking more like 12.
Okay. Conservation and open space, about $15 million. That's largely about ag pres and water quality efforts. Water quality is largely driven by federal law and state regulation, which is not to say we wouldn't be doing anything if somebody else wasn't telling us to, but we do have to respond to other levels of government. And we have the PFAs we mentioned a little bit earlier, and then a small pot for environmental compliance. This is basically for dealing with things that we haven't planned for that occasionally come up and we need to react quickly. Then if you look beyond 24, we don't have much in terms of specific projects, but we have ongoing ag pres, and the stormwater and water quality efforts. Roads, pavement management and pavement preservation, those are our ongoing programs for taking care of our road system. There are some specific projects in here, more than we've seen in most of the last decade. Extension to Georgetown Boulevard, Clees Mill Road slope repair. This is a county road that has a significant slope next to it that is failing. We need to do something about it. Monroe Avenue extension, Slacks Road, we need to see what we might need to take on there. Stormwater drain inspection and rehabilitation, this is another ongoing effort. If we look 25 through 29, you see a couple of those specific projects are budgeted in more than 1 year, and then the rest is ongoing projects. Things that are not in. A couple roads that have been talked about but are not budgeted. Talked for years about possible new salt barn facilities. Talked about a study for Slacks Road, but it's no budget. And again, this is not a complete list, just hitting some of it. Bridges. Remember, this is 80% federally funded. Our plan is driven by when we expect to get federal funding and what qualifies for federal funding. So you see the bridges that have some funding in fiscal year 24. Bridges are almost always multi-year projects. More bridges that are in the plan between now and fiscal year 29. And we always have a lot of bridge projects going, and this one, we're fortunate that we can always keep this going because of that federal funding. Some bridges that are not in. Like some other things we've talked about, there's a constant reprioritizing of bridges. What seems most urgent? What can we fit into the funding stream that we expect to be available? And from time to time, you'll find that a bridge that was in a plan now drops out because something else became a higher priority. Recreation. A lot of this happens because of program open space. This is another place where we always have a lot of activity. Program open space funding has been a little unreliable in the last decade. Always there, but we're not always sure how much. But it does allow us to get a lot done. I'm not going to go through all the projects, but you can see there's a number of things happening. And this is Rec and Parks if we look out to 29. Even here, we can't get it all done. Some things still get left out. General government, I just want to point out here, that sometimes people hear general government and say, what do I spend all that money on general government for? Just keep in mind there's all kind of things in here like the community college, the courts, the sheriff. Yes, there's a lot of stuff under the label general government. Project out at the community college. One of those consequences I guess you can't really plan for until you know. You know, the move to 5G has made their internal system, I don't want to say non-functional, but it doesn't function at the level it needs to. So we need to make improvements there. County building systemic renovations. This is our version of the school's roofs and HVACs. We have budget to expand courtroom 6. This is to try and give them a space that functions in a way that helps them schedule their trials in a more efficient way. And elections, we talked about this already a little bit earlier. Self-contained breathing apparatus we mentioned. Fleet lift replacement. We have 9 lifts. Is that right?
Sounds right.
We're not replacing one every year, but there's always a lift or lifts being replaced in a plan. General government unallocated. We've set this aside toward a capital project that we're still trying to work through some things. We'll probably talk more about this in the next process. Parking garage, we mentioned a little bit earlier. Public safety, emergency communications radio. This goes on forever. We have hundreds of radios, and they have a limited life, and also technology changes. We actually, with the last board, made a change to accelerate the replacement of some radios so that everybody was working on the same version. Microwave network replacement. This is one of those things where our vendor told us, oh, you have this outmoded piece of equipment. That doesn't work anymore. So we need to react. And then the sheriff headquarters.
That 8 million unallocated, what, is that just a holding for that, or what's the?
For now, still working through some things with the project. Didn't want to attach the money specifically to it yet.
Okay.
Everything here you're looking out is not specific projects, but ongoing efforts. Same here. Some things that are not in, some improvements to workforce development building across the street, athletic complex for the college, a new facility for facilities. Senior Center requests, Health Department requests. Courts and libraries, I'd like to see some other things happen. Sheriff. And again, even though there's a lot of things on the not in list, this is not the whole not in list. Another place where sometimes people will say to me, well, if there's not enough money, you just need to stop doing everything. And I have to remind them, well, we aren't actually doing everything. There's a lot that we're not doing. And in some cases, things that we really think we ought to be doing. Enterprise funds, remember these are separate funds of their own. Airport, small increase. Solid waste, $1 million. Changes in how we have to manage gases at the landfill. Utilities, I'm not going to go through all the project, but there are always lots of projects in utilities keeping the system functioning. Fiber network, equipment that makes the fiber do things, has to be periodically replaced. Okay, you asked about the water and sewer rates. Here's what the changes that are proposed would be. And not a new message, but a good place to stop and say, we pretty much know what it costs for us to run our water and sewer operations. They have to create their own revenue. So if we know what the cost is, we know what the revenue needs to be. Translating that into the rates is really just math. Nobody likes seeing these charges go up. I've not yet met a commissioner who liked agreeing to raise them. It's just a necessary part of running a system. Also have proposed changes at the landfill to the basic tipping fee from $65 to $66 a ton, and to the commercial and what's the-
Construction and demolition.
construction and demolition, thank you, from 80 to 82. You know, it's one of those things that people, you wouldn't think about it unless you kind of knew to think about it. The reason it's different is construction and demolition waste is inherently more difficult and takes up more space than other waste. There are places that have landfills specifically devoted to C&D. So wrapping up, still ahead of us, public hearing, 7 o'clock on May 9th at Carroll Community College. Budget adoption at 1 o'clock on May the 23rd. And I didn't put it on here, but I'll have my 5 community meetings. They are tomorrow, Wednesday at Eldersburg, Thursday at Mount Airy, then next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't remember the order of them, all in libraries, though.
Start at 7?
7 o'clock, yes.
Just so folks can.
So you kick off at 7 o'clock at the Mount Airy Senior Center this Thursday?
Library.
Library, okay, library.
The other side of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long walk. The budget is available online. And is that true? It is available right now?
I don't believe it's online right now, but it will be. It should be today.
I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
And this is part of when we were winding up your deliberations, I was talking about there's not more time because it takes time to turn all of your decisions into a proposed budget that it can actually be released. So even now, we haven't quite gotten to the point where we can put it online. Yeah, it's just what it takes. I mentioned earlier that if people have questions, we'll be glad to answer. You can send me an email, give me a call. I answer both. We'll get you the information you need. Is the budget button online this year? And online, there's a little button, I think it just says budget or budget information or something like
Questions?
that. Questions? Okay. You can touch there and leave a question, and we can get back to you that way
If you
too.
hit escape and go to the website, you might be able to show them. Hopefully it's there.
I'll pull it up.
Okay, he's gonna.
Oh,
pull it up.
okay, Chris. Good.
Maybe you need to.
Drop your presentation.
Yeah.
right?
And Ted, while we're waiting for that, would you
Need-
be able to, I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah, you need to open up the virtual window there for me, Ted.
Which one is that?
I don't know.
Did you see this?
What am I looking for?
At the very bottom, there's two. There should be some PowerPoints, and then there should be a window that
To
opens
the
up
right,
the.
Ted. Click on
There
it.
you
Yeah.
go. You have it. There you go. Thank you.
There it
Oh, okay. So
is. Here.
if you go to the county website, go to management and budget, on that page you'll see click here. So Commissioner Vigliotti, you were asking something?
I apologize. So, I guess the notices about the assessments were published over the last couple of days. Would you say a few words about that? Because there are a lot of questions about the associated taxes.
Oh, the constant yield.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The state requires us to publish an advertisement that says we are raising taxes, when I would say arguably we are not raising taxes. The tax rate is not changing. The state's point is that because assessments went up, we will get more revenue than we did previously. The ad says raising taxes, creating X number of dollars revenue. If we don't want the revenue to go up, you could reduce the tax rate by X and offset that. There's legislation this year that I believe is making that go away, which
Correct.
I will be happy for, because people often assume that you are making a decision to change tax rates, which is just not what's happening. Now, some people will argue for constant yield, and the idea of constant yield is property tax revenue doesn't increase. Property tax is our largest revenue. I'll just say our costs will continue to grow up. If our largest revenue doesn't change, I don't know how you would go about keeping the same level. Well, in fact, I won't even say that. You can't keep the same level of services. You would have to begin reducing services.
So basically, you have definition of two areas: property tax rate and property tax revenue. And maintaining our property tax rate is what we do, regardless of assessments. So therefore, property tax revenue rises. I guess it
Yes.
could decrease if SDAT and assessments went down, but
And that actually did happen to us.
and what constant yield allows is property tax revenue to remain the same. So the other part of the equation, I mean, you got to fix one part of the equation or another. You either fix the rate, not fix. You either identify the rate or you identify the assessment, and constant yield rate identifies the constant yield identifies the property tax rate and adjusting that. And
And the assessments are done by the state.
right.
And I will stand up in defense of the state here and say, my observation over the years is, well, on any given property, you might have an argument. Generally speaking, they are below the market. They don't stretch assessments to what you actually could sell your house for in most cases. And you're on the idea that revenue can go down. Now, fortunately, this has only happened to us once in all the years or one time, it might have been in 2 years. But it's funny, I remember joking about this back then. When our revenue went down, I said, well, where are the people arguing for constant yield?
Exactly. No, but I appreciate it because, I'm getting the same, emails and questions.
Thank you very much, Ted.
Any other questions? discussion. The amount of funds that we give to our nonprofits hasn't changed for the most part. To include the chamber and those 10, there's a few that we've increased, but the others have stayed flat, correct?
That's largely true, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any comments, questions?
Thank you for all of your assistance with this.
Yes, thank
To
you.
everybody in the department as well.
Now, at this time, don't we need a motion to accept
Nope, you already did that.
or what?
I did that.
You did that last week when you,
So we don't,
Yep,
We're done.
this is just informational.
so I could throw this back at you. Okay. Cool.
motion to adjourn, though.
Anything else? Any further comments? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
A motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.